Hello there. In this lesson, we're going to learn about the nervous system. So the nervous system is made up of, the brain and the spinal cord, along with all the nerves that run throughout a person's body or any animal's body, that for that matter, that allows for really fast communication between different parts of the body and responses to the environment around. So let's have a look and see how it works. So the cells that make up the nervous system are called neurons. And neurons are these really cool cells that can allow a charge to be transmitted along the surface. And they have these little projections that stick off the main part of the cell that are called axons. And the charge difference, that electrical signal, can go down these axons. Some of these axons have other cells wrapped around them that have this fatty layer called myelin that allows the charge pulse to travel a little more efficiently. It can kind of jump from spot to spot along the axon that has the myelin. So that makes it a little more efficient. Some cells, if they start to lose their myelin, won't work as well, and that could be related to some degenerative diseases in the brain. So yeah, you have these different neurons. Some of them are going to sense the environment around them. Some of them are going to signal or send signals to and from the brain. And we're going to have a look at how these different neurons work together. So there are different neurons that do different things within a living thing. The first type of neuron are going to be your sensory neurons. These are the ones that respond to the environment. Any sort of stimulus that you're going to be able to respond to has to be transmitted or turned into an electrical signal so that it can be transmitted towards the brain or the spinal cord for a response. The response usually comes in the form of a motor neuron, which would be a signal to, say, move away from the stimulus or toward it, whatever you have. So it's going to go in the other direction, usually to muscles that can move your body to respond to whatever stimulus there is. Finally, we got interneurons. These are the neurons that are found in the brain or spinal cord that are connected to each other. So all the thoughts and networks and analysis of the environmental stimulus that there may be is the result of millions of connections between neurons within the brain or the spinal cord. So there you go, 3 types of neurons doing different jobs. So the sensory receptors are really cool cells that change some sort of a stimulus, some sort of environmental factor, into that nerve signal. So the nerve signal is an electrical impulse, and the electricity comes from ions that have a charge, ions like sodium or potassium with a charge, usually a positive charge, and it's the concentration of those ions that makes the signal go down the surface. So what you need is a way to start that sort of cascade effect along the surface of the cell that can go really, really fast. And so that stimulus will be some sort of environmental factor like light, if it's your eyes, or sound, if it's your ears, or chemicals, if it's like your nose or your tongue or inside your stomach, or heat, if it's like your sense of touch or texture or pressure. All those can be a trigger for these ions to flow in or out of the cell and start the nerve response. And so that cascading sort of domino effect along the length of the nerve allows for the signal to travel to the brain or the spinal cord in order to get a response. So the neurons that are carrying these signals are not independent of each other. They're not running just anywhere in a body. They are in bundles that we call nerves. So a nerve will have a whole bunch of neurons inside of it. And some of them will have signals running one way, the sensory neurons, and then some of them will be going the other direction within the same nerve bundle. So you'll have neurons that are carrying signals in opposite directions, and then you'll also have like blood vessels as well to nourish these cells because they need all the same nutrients as every other cell in the body. So they'll need blood vessels in there too. So nerves are something that if you do a dissection later on in the course, you might be able to find some nerve bundles, which are a whole bunch of neurons all bundled together to carry electrical signals back and forth. So all of those nerve bundles going different places in the cell. There's big ones that go, to the limbs, of course. There are going to be neurons that are going to all of your organs inside, monitoring things and sending information to the brain or the spinal cord. All of that is considered one system, which you call the peripheral nervous system, or PNS. So the peripheral nervous system is everything that's not the brain or the spinal cord that has neurons. And as we went over before, the neurons are always little bundles called nerves that have signals going in both directions. The other part of the nervous system is the central nervous system, or CNS, and that is the brain and spinal cord. Now, both of these include a lot of interneurons, and those are the neurons that are connecting to each other in order to synthesize and make sense of all the information that comes in from the outside. Now, some things don't need to be very well organized, like pain responses can be like pretty immediate, and a lot of that is handled by the spinal cord. But if you want like higher level or thought or all the creativity, that sort of thing, that stuff happens in the brain, and there's a lot more of those interneurons there that have all those connections that make that possible. Both of these things are very delicate. I'm told that the consistency of the brain is similar to tapioca or jelly. And so it has to be protected. Of course, the skull does so for the brain, and the spinal cord is protected by the spine, all those little vertebrae that have a hole right through them that the spinal cord runs. And there's also a fluid that everything is floating in that sort of buffers any sort of jarring or quick motion that might happen. So very delicate and well protected in the body. So the simplest of our neural activities would be the reflexes that we have. You can think of a pain response as being a simple reflex where the stimulus would cause a sensory neuron signal to go to the spinal cord. There might be one or connection or two there in the spinal cord, and then a neuron response that comes down, maybe triggers the arm to pull back. And this could happen in like less than a second, where you can get this signal going back and forth really rapidly. So that's called a reflex arc, and that doesn't involve a lot of higher order brain function, just a little bit in your spinal cord to cause that response. So the main place where neurological activity takes place is, of course, the brain. And it is this massive collection of neurons, about 100 billion from what I read, and all interconnected to allow for all of that complex work that the brain does, whether it's automatic, like look after our breathing, or more complex, like integrating all the input from our senses, like vision and hearing, etc. So it is using a massive amount of energy. About 20% of the oxygen we breathe is consumed there, and a lot of the sugar that we consume gets used up there as well. And it's divided into 4 main sections. Section number 1, the frontal lobe. So that is, of course, this whole frontal section here of this part of the brain. The top part of the brain kind of looks like cauliflower. That is the cerebrum. And this little guy at the bottom here, that is your cerebellum. And then you got your brain stem that attaches to the spinal cord. Anyways, frontal lobe here at the front. Yay, that one usually makes sense to everybody. Then we have the parietal lobe, which is sort of the middle part here, kind of like a cap. So that's your parietal lobe here, frontal lobe here. Next one is the occipital lobe. Occipital lobe is the back part. And that just leaves the part at the side, which is over your temples, and it is called the temporal lobe. So here are 4 main sections of the cerebrum, which is the big part of our brain. So the last thing we're going to look at here in the brain is the cortex, and it's the outer layer of the big part of the brain. The cerebral cortex is the cortex of the cerebrum, and it is here where all the information coming from our senses and from other signals within the body is incorporated with our conscious thought. So this is all the higher order thinking, the part that you're hopefully using right now, in order to understand and learn about your world. So a few places of note are a place where the hearing is incorporated, which kind of makes sense. It's close to where the ears are, in the temporal lobe. We've got speech, which is further forward in the frontal lobe. We have movement, which is higher up in the frontal lobe. We got taste, which is sort of just above where we incorporate our hearing. And the most surprising one to me is where vision is, which is way back here in this occipital lobe. So you can imagine you got your eyeballs up here in the front, gathering the information, and then you have neurons, sensory neurons, going all the way to the back here, so that information can be interpreted by the brain. Okay, hope that was helpful. We'll talk to you soon.